Hello, nerds and geeks. I'm the real deal, and you're watching the DCEU Reimagined. Now, this is a series which looks at the Warner Brothers DC cinematic universe and tries to find ways to make it more cohesive and unified as a whole, and just individually better each film as well. I think we'll mostly stick with the Zack Snyder arc, pull in Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman, and then we'll see where we go from there. I'll start with Man of Steel, of course, the granddaddy of the DCEU. And it's still my personal favorite of the franchise. I think it has the best score outright. It's a genuinely good-looking movie, both in cinematography and design. It's got my favorite Superman suit. It's got some awesome action in it as well. But there's a few things that can be better. We'll go through that in category. Let's start with... Alright, immediately I know some of you will think that I want to strip away the flashbacks and tell the story more chronologically, but I don't want to do that. See, I think the childhood flashbacks really serve to make Clark a more introspective and reflective character. If anything, I'd like to add flashbacks into the story. And I don't mean whole new flashbacks. I mean taking that 20-minute opening, which is grand and great and fantastic, but I think a lot of that information is better served if we, the audience, learn this stuff as Clark learns it. And I think that builds good empathy, great empathy. I feel like that's something that's kind of missing in Man of Steel. I mean, it's there if you dig for it, but let's make it more approachable to a general audience by doing it like this. Act 1 needs a good break into Act 2, and I don't think it's quite there in the movie. It's a little nebulous where that break happens. Whereas in this, I want to see when Clark makes the decision to put on the Superman suit. We're going to put a lot of meaning into that choice. It's going to occur probably 10 minutes earlier than it does in the actual film. The cemetery scene where you get the tornado flashback, that'll be the midpoint now, so it'll happen just a little later than it does in the actual movie. And that's because this is going to be the first real challenge to the choice that Clark made putting on the suit. And then, of course, the break in Act 3 will be when he rejects Zod. So the opening of the movie will kind of cut out the council, Zod, still in the codex, but most of that stuff is gonna come back later on through flashback. Alright, this new opening will just be Clark's birth, then Jor-El and Lara having their discussion on what's right, and then sending the pod to Earth, which will still transition into Clark being on that fishing vessel. But now when Clark meets Jor-El for the first time, that scene starts the same, with him telling of the expansion of Krypton and this and that, using that liquid metal, which helps tell that history. And by the way, I really love that technology. It's really awesome because it not only is used in this like sharing of knowledge scene, but we see it in a couple different ways as this defensive, combative technology as well. I mean, later on we see the giant tentacles which are made of this material. When Clark asks the question, what happened? That's going to be our transition point back to Krypton. This is where we're going to see Jor-El speaking with the council on trying to get the authority to grab the codex and use it because Krypton is already lost. And then Zod comes in, bam, 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 kills the council, asks Jor-El to join his coup. Then we come back to present day in the scout ship as Jor-El and Clark are walking through the corridors and they come into the birthing chamber. And that's when we're going to start to see some of when Jor-El escapes from Zod's men and then jumps down into that water to go in and grab the codex out from the big Krypton birthing chamber. Finally, we'll see the imbuing of Kal-El with the codex. And once that happens, we cut back to the present for the last time in this sequence where Jor-El says the line,
"You were the embodiment of that belief, Kal. Krypton's first natural birth in centuries. That's why we risked so much to save you."
Now we're going to skip all the way to Zod's appearance. And this is where we're going to get flashbacks to Zod's men breaching Jor-El's house. This would be the first time we learn of this. And we'll be seeing this in the dream share. It's almost as if some of the memories of Zod is being pulled into this area of the mind. And Clark deduces from these images that Jor-El was killed by Zod. And bam, we got something very emotional that we see and hear and feel alongside with Clark. You know, this is one of the big things of doing the structural change, and I really think it would be a great, powerful moment, because we, the audience, have grown fond of Jor-El alongside Clark and are just now learning that he didn't just die because the planet died. He was slain by his own friend. And there's also a major structural change I'd like to do with the childhood flashbacks as well. And that would be that first flashback we get when, you know, Clark's like peaceful in the water, and we go back to the classroom and see him freaking out and trying to deal with his powers. I want to take that and move that to be the second flashback. Instead, we'll have Clark just after the oil rig explosion, comes to shore, then sees a bus, and that'll be the first flashback in this version of the movie. Another scene I'd like to insert would be after Clark has destroyed that man's big rig truck. You know, we see him hitchhike, or try to hitchhike. Well, I want to see him actually get a ride. And when he gets into this truck, I want to see pictures of this guy's family and this and that. And I want to see Clark have some remorse for what he did to the other guy. Like, terrible dude, did a terrible thing. But I want to start hinting at this internal conflict that Clark has. And it's about what kind of man is Clark going to be? Is he going to be a good man or a bad man when he stands before the world? So we see Clark has this heroic selflessness that's really fueled by his introspection, you know? He also has this vindictive, vengeful side that's more fueled by impulsiveness. Clark has to mature before he can become Superman. I mean, deep down in his heart, he's always been Superman. He doesn't put on a persona to be Superman. He is. But if he steps out into the world before he's ready, could that corrupt him? And so after this little bit, we'll probably hear like something on the radio, and that brings us to the flashback in the classroom. And what's really nice about this is the whole make the world smaller that Martha Kent gives to Clark as a way to calm him. That leads directly into Clark's first meeting with Lois Lane. And of course, in Batman vs. Superman, we know that this make the world smaller, you are my world, is a big part of their relationship. So the Krypton flashbacks in this version will serve to develop the external conflict of this narrative while putting us on this journey of discovery with Clark. While the childhood flashbacks remain as a way to look into who Clark is as a person, and what drives him, and what struggles he has. Externally, Clark must choose between Krypton and Earth. This can be made stronger by focusing on Clark's longing for his origin, for where he belongs, who his people are, and to hopefully rejoin said people. Now, internally, Clark must choose what kind of man he's going to be. That means we need to start looking at his flaws. Clark has a couple flaws in Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman, but he's also got a fatal flaw as well. And it's not that he has so much self-doubt. I would say it's his inability to not save people. And it is a true fatal flaw because it's not only a driving force in his decision-making, it also gets him killed later on in the series. That also brings me to one of my pet peeves about the complaints towards Man of Steel and Henry Cavill's Superman in general. That's that people paint him as a uncaring or he doesn't save anybody, and that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, from the very start of Clark being shown on Man of Steel, he is out there saving people against his own self-interest. That's true from childhood to adulthood. So how can we improve the conflict going on in Man of Steel? I think the best way to do that is to draw from the novelization a bit. Use the fact that Zod's killing of Jor-El makes Kal his legal son now. And this will be something that Zod tells Clark when they wake up from the dream share, expanding the culture of Krypton, but it also leads up to an important choice. Earlier in the movie, we follow Clark's journey. He wants to know who he is, he wants to know who his people are, he wants to rejoin his people. And now he finally meets his people. He meets a new father, and this father offers him acceptance at a scale that he's never imagined. He's had his adoptive parents. That's just two people. Now he's got a whole culture and what will be a whole new planet where he belongs. And this is something that Earth can probably never offer him. So it's a very difficult thing to say no to for Clark. However, it comes at the cost of destroying all of Earth and the people on it. Now, this decision forces the external conflict that Clark is presented with now the internal conflict that he's been dealing with his whole life. And that is, what kind of man will Clark be? Is he the kind of man that would destroy a people to save another? And that goes both ways for both Krypton and Earth. Will he let his desire for acceptance and belonging motivate him? Or will he put away selfishness and try to do what's just? So let's look at the childhood flashbacks again. They serve to tell us why Clark makes the decisions that he makes. Ahead of Clark choosing to turn himself over to humanity, we see Jonathan challenge him.
You just have to decide what kind of man you want to grow up to be, Clark, because whoever that man is, good character or bad, he's going to change the world.
I think maturity is a big factor into this decision. See, Clark's fatal flaw might always eventually lead him to doing what's right and what's selfless, but if he's too immature to listen to that, he can make a lot of the wrong decisions before he makes the right one. And if we look at how the tornado flashback begins, it begins with Clark being a punk. He's immature, he's bratty there. A lot of people miss, because Clark himself in Man of Steel misses, that Jor-El didn't want him to step out and save him because he thought the world wasn't ready. The world would never be ready for Clark. He needed Clark to be ready. I think it's there in the movie, especially if you look all the things that Jonathan actually says to him, but you look at the very end when Martha speaks with Clark and tells Clark that Jonathan always saw what he would become. That's why it's so great that tornado sequence takes place in the midpoint, because Clark has already decided what kind of man he wants to be, what he wants to embody. He's not sure if he can stay true to that. And I think the best way to, clarify this for an audience is when Clark tells Lois Lane that the world isn't ready. I think we, the audience, need to know that he doesn't actually mean the world. Clark means I might not be ready. So I might not be able to stay true to who I want to be. I mean, could you imagine that teenage Clark taking on the weight of the world? We see how heavy his burden is in Batman vs. Superman. Could that young man withstand all that and stay true to his character? I don't know. Probably not. And I think that's a good thing that Jonathan sacrificed himself so that his son could be ready. So now we got to talk about who the bad man Clark could be. We see his pettiness towards Jonathan in the argument on the interstate. We see him wrathful against Zod.
You think you can threaten my mother?
And we see him vengeful against that trucker. So if Clark has a desire to be with his own kind, it's very possible for him to be tempted by that offer Zod makes, especially since Zod offers to be a living father to him, which he doesn't have. And without that deep introspection, that reflectiveness that this Clark has, he might have taken this choice. But he's somebody who's constantly looking inward, trying to discern what is good, what he should do, and who he needs to be. If Clark was more impulsive, he would choose Krypton. He would choose to have a new father, especially one that offers him greater acceptance. He would even choose some level of vengeance against the Earth, which has only brought him pain. And so Zod's offer to build Krypton on top of Earth actually has some pull to him now. So I wouldn't have Zod leave with a no. I'd have Zod leave with a think about it. But that's when Jor-El appears, and he comes to Cal and tells him,
You can save her, Cal. You can save all of them.
Now this should come as Clark reaffirming that choice he made at the end of Act 1, that he's going to embody hope. This means he can't condemn one people to rebirth another people. But he also can't simply use the Phantom Zone as a kill button. He needs to use a Phantom Zone the way it's intended. A holding cell with the hope that these people can be rehabilitated and integrate onto Earth. And Clark needs to be the one that makes the decision to use the Phantom Zone this way, especially for this purpose. So when Clark crashes into the scout ship where Zod's residing, that's going to be when he tells Zod no and then offers him the other way. But of course Zod is a old Krypton purist, and so sorrowful Superman has to say,
Krypton had its chance!
I'd also like to see Clark get bloodied and bruised in the one-on-one battle with Zod later on. They're two equally powered people, so they should be able to physically affect one another, especially since we've seen Clark bleed in this already. Another thing that would be cool to see is, people complain about Clark not helping more in the battle. I don't see that as a problem, but if he were to do it, I think it would add so much to it. And I don't mean like, oh, he just whimsily saves people and it's easy and this and that. I mean that he puts his body on the line every time he reaches out to save somebody, and Zod punishes him for it, which leads him to realize, I can't fight this way. It's too difficult. I gotta take Zod out of this, and that's when they go up towards space. It's more Clark's direct decision to take him there. And Zod, of course, realizes this and turns the fight back down. Zod gets held. Clark has the upper hand, and he's got one more choice to make.
If you love these people so much, you can mourn for them.
And this is driven more from Clark's actions within that fight than the more general Clark chose Earth, so I'm going to hurt Earthlings. Now, he sees how much Clark cares for saving individuals, and that's why he targets them. I've already covered a couple choices that Clark should make, such as Clark rejecting Zod as his father, and then coming up with the Phantom Zone trick himself. But let's dig a little deeper into these two decisions. Instead of Clark outright choosing Earth and humanity, I would like this to more feel like he's stepping outside of both groups, taking on this ambassador for peace role, whereas he doesn't want to choose Earth over Krypton or vice versa. He's wanting to help both out. And that's why he specifically uses the Phantom Zone to capture as many of the Kryptonians, because he wants to bring them into Earth society, have the two peoples help each other. I think that really works for what Jor-El is desiring for Clark, to bring wonders to Earth. I don't think Clark should fully buy into Jor-El's belief that, Krypton is completely done to the point where Jor-El and Lara couldn't even come. I think Clark realizes that these people can change and can change for the better. And I would really like that to come through in these two decisions. Now let's get back to that Act 1 break when Clark puts on the suit. Two ways we could alter this choice and make it stronger. The first is a weaker version, but it's more easy for me to make this change because I don't have to cut, that fantastic speech that Jor-El gives about hope. And if you look at it, I tried to insert things into it, and the flow of it is so good. It's so well performed, it's so well written. Any change to it would probably worsen it. So instead of doing the bigger change that I think would work better, Jor-El allows Clark to choose the colors of his suit. The colors will represent the role a person takes in society. As his son, he wants his son to be able to choose his own path. That's the whole point of having the biological birth against the system of Krypton. So what I want is, Jor-El is wearing the colors of a scientist. Black denotes the colors of a warrior. Clark chooses red and blue, but we don't quite learn what that means yet. Instead, it's when he appears before Zod that we learn this. Either Feora or Zod make the remark that it's very fitting that Clark wears these colors, and it's that they are the colors of an ambassador. This choice allows Clark to define how he will embody hope, how he will embody his father's legacy. Now here's the second way we could change this and make it a strong Act 1 break. But we lose a lot of that good Jor-El stuff. It's very much a stronger way to characterize Clark. And that's that he himself chooses the crest of hope. Chooses that's what he wants to embody. Instead of it being a family legacy passed on to him, it's birthed out of himself. He really embodies and strengthens the theme of free will that's in this movie. It's just that speech from Jor-El is such a beautiful baby. I'd hate to kill it. So if push came to shove, I would probably just settle with the colors of an ambassador. If we go back further to the fishing boat, I want to put a reason why Clark is there. In his living quarters, there are these paintings and drawings and pages, and it's all this like ancient civilization, alien stuff. You even go so far as Clark has marked things out, like he's been studying this stuff for so long that he's proven most of it wrong. But he's still searching, and particularly searching for something in the Arctic. So not only does this show that Clark has some journalistic skills that before he becomes a reporter in the last 2 minutes of this movie. It also adds consequence to him leaving the ship and going to the oil rig to save those people. So he's got to give up all this information, all this research that he's dug up and lived with for years, but he's also got to give up this free ticket to the Arctic. So that adds weight to when he's at the bar and he's got to work, and it seems like he's trying to work his way to get there. But because he chose the selfless thing, he gets rewarded with intel greater than he could have imagined. He overhears the military man speaking of, what we'll find is the scout ship. That also gives some meaning to that plot convenience. That it has some thematic meaning to it. There's some additional things to support changes to this film, as well as probably later ones in the DCEU. I want to hint at a version of Supergirl through Clark's, research that he's gathered over the years. And it doesn't just have to be stuff that's found on the ship, in his quarters in the ship. The flashback with the bullies where he gets his books knocked down, you could sneak a few things in there, little hints. This comes from knowing that Darkseid is the end goal in that huge Darkseid battle. But I'd like to see, because of the open pod, I would like to see Supergirl was at that event. And Clark has some knowledge of the mythology of this stuff. And so when we later get into Justice League and Justice League 2, Clark is able to offer some insight into these events that Diana and Arthur might not know. And so they each have this nugget of stuff that they get to bring to the League. And we're talking about how Jor-El has this desire for Clark to help humanity accomplish wonders. Where you have the scout ship and you have all this alien technology. And I'd like to highlight a few things about that. You have the Phantom Zone tech, which, at first it's a pocket dimension, it's storage, they built a prison out of it. So it has, pros and cons in that. But it's also this slip space technology that allows for very efficient space travel. This is really good stuff that can really build humanity's future. And you also got the World Engine, which has a sense of wonder to it, but it's more of a evil technology. It destroys to create, and it wipes out entire civilizations and so on. Very tied to colonization, and bloody colonization at that. Looking at this stuff, looking at this technology, you have the kind of starting points of future conflicts that Superman, Lex Luthor, and Brainiac, bringing in Brainiac, could involve. And it's about using technology correctly. Not just using it for self-serving interest, not just using it to destroy because you can, not just using it because you have it and others don't have it. It's to better the people around you. And I think that would be a great thing for Superman to embody. He's not just an ambassador to the world through peace, he's an ambassador through science and such. And I'd like to see that in more Superman solos and even some of the Justice League stuff. So number one, the audience is step in step with Clark during his discovery of origin, during the discovery of what this conflict really is. 2, he's motivated by both a selfish desire to find belonging as well as the need to determine who he is. 3, he determines the ideal that he wants to embody himself, and that's hope, or like I said, it's choosing to be an ambassador in his role to embody hope. 4, but he's afraid he cannot achieve this embodiment or he can't maintain it. 5, then a new father figure offers him the want that he desires, but at the expense of the need. 6, finally Clark becomes his own man. Outside of all this, outside of Jonathan, outside of Jor-El, outside of Zod, he chooses his own role, his own way of doing things. So not only does this strengthen the characterization and conflict within Man of Steel, I think it lays an astoundingly strong foundation for the rest of the DCEU and for the Superman character himself. Alright, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, especially if you made it this far. Hit the comments or go to mcmdebates.com and tell me what things you would change about Man of Steel, what things you can't change, And then if you want to, tell me what you liked, what you didn't like about this video, how to improve, maybe if I suck. I'm the real deal. Goodbye.